Hello, and welcome to Glory Be, interesting people and how they pray.
Each week, we chat with interesting people about their lives, their work, and how they pray. I'm Sharon Hannish.
And I'm Mike Malcolm. Our guest this week is Mr. Bruce Sander. He is a seminarian for the Diocese of Tulsa and Eastern Oklahoma, and is currently in a pastoral year here at the Church of St. Mary. He earned his associate's degree in business and enterprise development from Tulsa Community College, and in 2020 graduated from Conception Seminary College in Missouri with a bachelor's degree in philosophy. Before he entered seminary, Bruce worked for 12 years at the Tulsa City County Library system. His hobbies include constructing model cars and various liturgical items, ham radio, and cooking. Welcome, Mr. Bruce Sander.
Thank you, Mike. Happy to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, that is great. Now, full disclosure, we've known each other forever.
Yes.
So,
since the cathedral days.
Yeah, I think you were 7. That's one of my earliest memories of you, just about.
Yeah, First Communion.
Yeah. So, and I probably got pictures someplace.
Yeah.
So
we'll put those in the show notes.
Yeah. Depending on how the interview goes, we've got this. We've got pictures to entertain ourselves. So I did not know that you were into ham radio.
Yeah. So a while back, I was going to this Church on the Move youth service called 180, and I went with this family who was the father had been in the Navy and was very much into ham radio, and he got me into it. And I'd always been involved with like software programming, hardware. I loved taking things apart as a kid and putting them back together, seeing how they worked. And it was just a short quiz you had to take, no Morse code. Mm-hmm. I got my technician class license, and my favorite kind of aspect of being a ham was the yearly field day event where we go out in like a park, set up a bunch of heavy equipment, huge antennas, and just try to contact as many people in the world as possible. And then we like exchange postcards. We have like little code words we give each other. So my furthest contact was a ham in Germany.
Nice.
Yeah. And I've always enjoyed public service, through the library. That's public service. And also being a ham, we'd provide emergency communications, but also just public events like Tulsa Tough. We do the communications for all the activities there. So
yeah, that is awesome.
Yeah.
Have you ever had to participate in a real emergency?
No, the closest I did anything in that area was storm chasing. I would help provide communications for storm chasers, but that's it.
What was your role?
Just relaying messages from the spotter to back to the station.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, I did back in the 80s. It was probably 84. Couldn't pass the Morse code test. But we'd throw an antenna out the window of my 6th grade classroom and stretched up. We could connect it. And one day the weather was just right. The ionosphere was working with us, and we were able to talk to a guy in Russia.
Nice.
Back in the 80s, there was all that tension between the U.S. and this was a really nice guy who spoke English, fortunately, but it was all tapped out in Morse code.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if there's a Cyrillic code, or if most of it's all English.
Yeah.
Though, if you're going to do Morse code, but you're speaking with it. That's cool. Well, tell me about model making.
Yeah, this I got from my dad. He's always been building like little plastic model cars, the kinds you can get at like Hobby Lobby. And I was just fascinated by that. And so, I don't know, it's just something I've always enjoyed working with my hands. I started as a kid working with Lego sets. Like I like building and being creative. That's like my creative outlet. And, model cars, it takes time, especially if you're painting them. I don't know. It's kind of like cooking in a way. It's kind of slow, therapeutic. It makes me more mindful. I have to like focus on what I'm doing.
And then you also make liturgical items.
Yeah. So I've made like altar cloths. I've made like little handmade reliquaries. I just did that for my dad for All Saints Day. Also am in the process of doing that for the All Saints Day Mass at Church of St. Mary on Monday. Just various little things like that.
Do you have any ambition to maybe continue that as a career, ordained or not?
Yeah, so a couple of seminarians at Conception who were there with me started making their own missal covers, and one guy was showing me how to make my own vestments.
Wow.
And apparently it's really not that hard as long as you have a wide enough workspace and the right equipment. It's actually cheaper than...
Well, it's kind of like the bishop. He made his own.
Yeah, he made his own crozier.
Yeah, he made his own crozier.
So I was like, well, I could just make my own chasuble and alb and all that. So.
Yeah. That's awesome. Then it's whatever you want.
Yeah,
custom.
yeah, exactly. Custom.
Totally custom. Nobody else looks quite like you do.
Yeah.
You know?
So you mentioned you were doing some stuff in the seminary. So you're in the seminary. You just finished up at Conception. How was that? So you're in the middle of a pandemic, right? Did the pandemic hit while you were there?
Oh, yes. So it was halfway through the spring semester 2020, and we had no idea that this was coming down the pipeline, that we were all going to get sent home. It was end of a busy day of classes, and they all just take us into this big classroom where we have our formation conferences, which is basically like a weekly statement about human character and development. And they told us, because this pandemic is starting to go global, and we've decided you're all going home for 2 weeks. And, at first we were excited. It's like, okay, cool. I don't have to finish this really long paper that I'm
Right.
But then 2 weeks turned into you're staying where you are back home for the rest of the semester, and you basically had to teach yourself the rest of the semester.
So did they didn't do virtual classes like Zoom?
Some teachers were very hip to Zoom and all that, and some weren't.
Okay.
So it was pretty difficult.
So you finished out that semester. And then were you here for the summer, but could you even be assigned to a...
Yeah, so we still got assigned to parish assignments. We did it in pairs, and I was assigned to St. Benedict's in Broken Arrow. But unfortunately, COVID kept shutting everything down, and there were so many restrictions, so I wasn't able to do as much as I would have liked. I wasn't able to get as involved as I would have liked. I got to work in their food pantry, which I really liked. But there were just some retreats for virtual Bible school, all that stuff kept getting canceled. So
okay,
it was very atypical.
Right, not the typical pastoral assignment to get kind of a good experience of what it's like to be a priest.
Exactly. Yeah.
So then you go. Did you return in the fall to seminary?
Yeah. So I returned. We all returned as seniors, my senior class, and the first half of it, the fall semester, was very restrictive because they were still figuring things out. Normally, seniors have what's called the senior privilege, where as long as it doesn't interfere with classes or anything like that, we can just go off campus whenever we want, go into town. That was taken away. We had to turn our car keys in to the head of the school. We weren't allowed to leave unless it was one day of the week during a certain window. We could go into town masked and do grocery shopping.
Now, did they have you mask in the
Yes. So as long as we were in a room and it was just us and we weren't in any way around the monks, we could take our masks off. But walking around campus, a bunch of other functions, we had to wear masks.
Are the monks pretty elderly?
Yes.
Okay.
A lot of them are also in, what do you call it?
They're immunocompromised? Or,
yeah.
So you had to be really careful.
Yes. Yeah, they basically split the whole seminary into the seminary household and the monastic household, and the two households were not allowed to interact with each other.
Yeah, which is unfortunate, but probably a good idea given their situation. Okay, so now you moved through the next semester and graduated on time. Did it impact you at all in terms of completing your coursework? Or
No. So the second half of the senior year, so the spring semester, they kind of loosened the restrictions a little bit because morale was pretty low, and also we had kind of learned what was working, what wasn't. And it was working because compared to other seminaries, we didn't have a single case.
Wow.
Nice.
Not a single case. And, we all finished, on time. And we had the senior privilege restored to us.
Oh,
so
nice.
We had a little bit more freedom, which was nice.
Good.
You could go off campus.
Yeah.
So you have a degree in philosophy from a minor seminary, which means what? What's next?
So that grants me admittance to theology, a school of theology. So I'll probably have to start applying for that sometime in the spring. Once I'll find out over the Christmas break where the bishop wants to send me for theology.
So the bishop makes the decision, but wherever you go, you'll have a few other Tulsans there, I would guess. Usually. Yeah.
I was the last Tulsa guy at Conception for the past 2 years, but wherever I go next, I'll have at least a couple of Tulsa guys.
Yeah. And then what is that school of theology? What will you, I mean, obviously you'll study theology, hence the name, but what else will you be doing?
Well, kind of pretty much the same basic structure that's at minor seminary. So there's 4 pillars. I'll be focusing on like my character formation, how I interact with others, my spiritual formation, my prayer life, my pastoral skills, the priestly life, and intellectual. That'll be all the classes. And the first 2 years of theology, from what I understand, I'll get most of the intellectual stuff out of the way. That's like all the graduate level courses. And that the last 2 years of theology is more hands-on, like more practical, like practicing preaching, practicing confessions, practicing Mass.
How to say Mass, all that.
Yeah.
So right now you're on a pastoral year.
Yes.
Which is part of formation. So for our listeners, what are you doing? What do you do during a pastoral year?
So in our diocese, it's not mandatory. There's a bunch of other dioceses that actually require each seminarian to do pastoral year. So each pastoral year is like custom built. It's focused on whatever you feel you need to focus on, or whatever the seminary suggested that you focus on. For me, I really felt I need to step into the role of a teacher. So a big part of this pastoral year is like helping teach confirmation, RE. I'll be helping present to the RCIA class and working with them. Another thing I'm kind of focused on is just kind of seeing the day-to-day life of a priest. I didn't get a whole lot of that at Conception, again, because COVID shut down a lot of things, and that included going and working in parishes, going into the city and working with people. So, it's sort of making up for lost time in some ways.
That's actually a really good reason to choose to do a pastoral year, having come out of the pandemic, like you mentioned, and not being able to work in a parish while you're going to school. So, that's a good idea. Okay, so normally, our podcast, we talk about why we think you're interesting and listen to kind of what you're doing, but we also want to talk about your prayer life. So talk about, so you grew up Catholic, because you grew up here in Tulsa, as Mike mentioned. You went to Holy Family. You were self-taught, kind of homeschooled. And so talk about your prayer life. How did it develop? So you were Catholic, then maybe kind of prayer in seminary, how you pray right now during this pastoral year. Just kind of talk about what draws your heart.
Well, for most of my life, my prayer was really sporadic and unstructured. Like, the only time I really felt that I was close to God or in prayer was altar serving as a kid, being near the altar. It wasn't until, probably mid-20s, I'd already been out on my own for a while, had my own apartment, and I discovered Liturgy of the Hours. I had never known what that was, and after I got a Deacon Jerry Maddox at my church to teach me how to pray it, I found that I actually had a prayer life. It was structured. It was something for me to commit to. And I find that that's what works best for me, is to start with praying the Psalms, something that's structured, which kind of sets the tone, the atmosphere for then just kind of contemplative prayer, just sitting there and just being at peace with God and letting Him speak to me.
I've always wanted to learn how to pray the Liturgy of the Hours. So tell me, so you have a book, and don't you have to flip back and forth or something? Explain.
Yes.
For our listeners who aren't familiar with Liturgy of the Hours, we all know that priests pray it and many others. Yeah. Can you take me through morning prayer, or how do you pray the Liturgy of the Hours?
So the book is, for the most part, split up into 2 halves. One half is the 4-week cycle of psalms. So in 4 weeks, you pray every single psalm. The other half is sort of the prayers that change every day. The part with the psalms that's consistent. The other half is called the proper. It contains all the little prayers that change. There's actually a third section that has like the special prayers if it's like a feast day or the memorial of a saint, that sort of thing.
Nice.
And then it's divided into 5 different times of day that you pray. So that's early morning, daytime, evening, and nighttime, which you're supposed to pray right before you go to bed.
So do you do that 5 times a day? You sit down at some point and do those?
Wow. Most of the time alone? Or is there some time that you get to pray with other people?
Yeah, I prefer to pray with other people, especially in seminary. I prefer to pray night prayer in groups. At Conception, we always prayed early morning and morning prayer as a community, and also evening prayer. Here at Church of St. Mary, Father Jack and Father Vince and I will get together Tuesday and Thursday, and we'll pray evening prayer together and then go out for dinner. Other than that, I usually pray the morning prayers on my own, or if it's the weekend, I pray the evening prayer in church with people, because I also like to do that with the rosary on Saturday morning. I like to be able to pray in common with people.
Okay, so you enjoy the Liturgy of the Hours, and you mentioned the rosary. What other kind of prayer? So is Conception, is it Benedictine?
It is, yeah.
Is there a particular spirituality or saint or someone that you enjoy praying with?
Well, the Benedictines really focus on Lectio Divina, so divine reading. So that's usually what I use in my contemplative periods of prayer. As for like devotion to saints, I actually have a pretty big devotion to St. Damien of Molokai. Nice. So the year before I entered seminary, 2017, I lived at the Damien House, which is like a community of lay Catholic men who were considering applying to become a seminarian, considering the priesthood, a place for them to live. And so I was one of the last people that lived there. So
would you all pray in common?
Yes. It was like a prelude to seminary life to kind of give you an idea of what it would be like.
You're a longtime cathedral parishioner.
Yes.
Did you happen to be in town when the relics of St. Damien came to the cathedral? It was pretty cool. Yeah, there was a time where a lot of different relics, Maria Goretti, Damien, John Vianney, just a bunch of big saints came there.
Oh, but at the Damien House, we did have a relic of St. Damien on loan from a priest. So
that's pretty
we just
awesome.
had that in our oratory every day.
Yeah. Well, what inspires you about him?
Just his deep understanding of what it is to be a priest. It's a sacrificial life of self-gift. I felt, understood that very deeply, more than most people realize. And he was willing to really give himself away to help people that everyone else had abandoned.
Yeah.
Yes, so can you, for people who aren't familiar with Father Damien, can you give just kind of a quick bio about what he was doing, his work?
There was a leper colony. I can't remember the name of the island in Hawaii.
Some little Hawaiian island.
Yeah. That had been completely abandoned by people. They were dying, and there was no one to minister to them. And I can't remember who sent him there. It might have been his bishop, but he went there, lived among them, and ended up dying of leprosy himself.
That's right. I think Father O'Brien there are other. Father O'Brien, I thought he was his favorite saint, too.
Yeah, I think he's got, big pictures of St. Damien.
Yes.
Over there in Stillwater,
I remember that, Okay, so we've talked about, prayer and what you do that draws your heart. So it's often difficult for people to pray. Has there been a time in your life where it has been difficult for you to pray? Do you have any recommendations for people who are going through a dry spell or having a tragedy, or even during COVID, people have talked about prayer being a little...
Yeah. Well, a definite, difficult period would have been when my mother died. She died over 10 years ago of cancer, and That was definitely a dry spell for me. And my recommendation for anyone who's going through a dry spell like that would be just consistency. Is whatever your prayer life is, whatever structure you have in place, is to keep doing it. Don't grow lax in it. Don't let it slip by. The worst thing you can do in any kind of spiritual dry period is to abandon that sort of consistent structure that you have. Usually because we're deprived of our spiritual consolations, we want to abandon them or try something different. This is another thing. We get this feeling or maybe this advice that we should try something different, but actually it's in those periods we want to stay close to what we've been doing.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Well, on to another topic about prayer. We always ask everybody, if you could ask the whole podcast listening audience or the whole world to join you in a single prayer intention, what would that be?
It'd be for everyone who's suffering from addiction, any kind of addiction. I talk to a lot of people and they confide in me, and this is what I see is that a lot of people have some sort of addiction, whether it's drugs, pornography, food. It could be anything. But I think our culture today kind of glorifies addiction and really reinforces it. So my prayer would be for anyone suffering from any kind of addiction.
Well, would you lead us in a Glory Be?
Absolutely, Mike.
Okay. We'll pray for all those who are suffering from addiction.
Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen.
Thank you, Mr. Bruce Sander.
Thank you for having me.
Excellent.
It's a pleasure.
Glory Be is a production of the Office of Communications at the Church of St. Mary in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I'm your producer, Mike Malcolm. See you next time.